Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, July 8th, 2020. Time for yet another show. It's, as we said, a Wednesday show. That means Greg comes back. Greg, just come on here and do the first hour, and I will take a nap. And, I will review the news. Yes, right. And prepare for the second hour. That's what I really meant to say. It's dragging on, this disastrous pandemic. The president making it worse. Yesterday, of course, we mentioned to you that he was hosting some sort of a discussion about what they were planning to do about schools, or what they were planning to force people to do about schools, and none of the why, of course, or how really was being discussed. The why, I suppose, was covered pretty clearly, and they've been pretty open about it. They simply think that schools should be open, and they know from, I guess, hearing from parents, and there are, I imagine almost universally, parents are in favor of schools being open, absent, of course, any threat from the coronavirus. They would rather have schools open. And, in the black and white world of Donald Trump, that just means, well, why don't you just, right? Why don't you justism, once again, prevailing for the day? We're going to force the schools to be open. There was, I think, some mention at some point yesterday, or perhaps on Monday, about the measures being taken using other angles to force the schools open, that the immigration policy shop, such as it is in the Trump administration, was changing the rules such that foreign students who are here on student visas would lose their clearance to stay in the country if their schools weren't open and offering in-person classes. Why would you do something like that? Well, for one, you hate, I guess, what are immigrants. I mean, I don't really necessarily traditionally think of foreign students here on student visas as immigrants per se, so much as people going to school in the United States. I don't know whether they intend to stay here. They maybe don't even know whether they intend to stay here. They may very well plan to return to their own country after studying, or, hey, move on to a third country. I don't know exactly what they're up to, but I guess they now count any foreigner as, well, I suppose if it's xenophobia that drives what you're doing, then I guess it wouldn't make any difference to you whether the person was an immigrant or someone who intended to stay on or pursue citizenship in the United States afterwards. After all, they are all about throwing out the immigrants, legal or otherwise, and I think they've made things pretty plain. But I did see that, I guess, Ken Cuccinelli, who by default, I guess, has some of this stuff fall under his purview, because I still don't think he's in a permanent Senate-confirmed position anywhere, but nonetheless was on television discussing the measure and was very open about it. And apparently, first thing out of the box, admitted, the reason we're doing this is to force colleges and universities to open and offer in-person classes. Again, not an order I'm familiar with, and perhaps one that is easily met by declaring classes to be open for a day and then closing classes again. I don't know. We can check in on that, but I did retweet that at some point yesterday. I'll have to scoop that up and see if I can find it and share it with you. But he was quite open about that, and I guess the roundtable discussion they used, I don't know what was going on or where it was, but there. In fact, I see some video of it from C-SPAN 2, and he apparently used the opportunity more to have another one of those sessions where we go around the table and everyone has to say something nice about me, Donald Trump, praise me in some way, and then make whatever stupid comment it is you came here to say. I also note from the video that they have very clearly gone out of their way to provide less social distancing between the participants here. Of late, we have seen the round table format. And I mean, their version of the round table is the big ring of long tables strung together. But they've gone to that in order to accommodate social distancing for the most part. Here, I guess, since the topic of the day was to hell with all of that, they just simply, more or less packed people together at about the distance you usually see them, minus social distancing. Plus, I see there's some sort of additional observers in the background behind the participants, and I don't know exactly who they are or who they're supposed to represent, but they too are, for the most part, maskless. I do see one mask among the group here, and sitting at close quarters. So, sounds like another successful policy summit for the Trump administration. They simply put themselves out there and said, we're opening the schools, and we don't care how, and we don't care whether you find out why. So, just sort of an interesting start to yesterday, and I think it may even have started the event while we were on the air yesterday. And, it's pretty astonishing. Let's see, and I think not too far from that one. Yeah, there we are. I have the tweet that I mentioned from Tim Massey, who is a foundation and college trustee, he tells us in his profile here. Let me open that up again and take a look. Anything else? We can find out maybe where he's from. No, why would anybody tell us that? Anyway, he happens to have tweeted out that Ken Cuccinelli, this was some 18 hours ago, just said on CNN the reason for ICE's international student ruling is to force colleges and universities to open. He also cannot understand the international students' $41 billion impact on the economies of the schools they attend and the communities in which they live. But that would be advanced economics, and I doubt Ken was up to that. But it was just interesting to see them open about using immigration policy as a blunt instrument to drive healthcare policy, public health policy, I guess I should say, just to differentiate, and education policy. Like they couldn't figure out how to do that with an education department or a public health service, or perhaps the education department and or public health service refused to do their bidding on that because they knew that it was dangerous, foolish, and outlandish thing to propose. So they had the immigration department come up with a way. What sledgehammer do you have that we can make my why don't you justism approach to opening the nation's schools work? And the answer is, it's a twofer, sir. I can kill two birds with one stone. We can force the schools open and punish people from other countries all at once, and they were only too glad to do it. So, okay, fantastic. We'll try and be efficient here, too. We'll start with Greg Dworkin by having him round up the news, because I was so flabbergasted by this one that I failed to round up the rest of it. So, here we go. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. Listen, I have to tell you, this was one of my all-time favorite introductions to the show. You hit every single important point.
I did?
Yeah.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
That's it for me. Wow.
We're done.
Okay, that's good. I know I should take that as high praise, just because of how much high praise there's been for you in the comments about the show in the last couple of days. Now I feel
so much going on. I mean, I'm going to tell you what I said, and then I'm going to tell you what Mark Murray said.
Okay.
Because I think we have to focus a little bit about schools for right now, and then we'll do some of the political stuff. We got some great stuff today.
All right.
But as far as the schools go, people are not saying or seeing this clearly enough. You cannot open schools until the virus is controlled in your area, or you're going to shut right back down again.
Yeah, or you're going to hurt a lot of people.
Well, but that'll force you to shut back down again.
Yes, and people will stop going, and then you'll shut the schools because it doesn't make any sense. There's no one in. Right.
I mean, there's a number of different ways the schools close. You do it precautionary because you see cases are rising, or you're stubborn about it, like in Florida, and then you do it because people are dying. But either way, you're going to shut the schools again.
I guess that's
so
true.
All good school plans, the bubble ones where a cohort of students go together, and then if one of them is positive, the entire class is quarantined for 14 days like they do in England. However you do it, it all depends upon having local virus control. And that's true for the economy. We understand that. You can't get the economy going until you get the virus under control. It's like that for hospitals. We understand that. You can have great surge plans, but it doesn't work until you get the virus under control. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed. And the same is true with schools. There's nothing different about it. You have to get virus under control. That has to be job one. And what Trump is doing And this is funny because, I will make a case, I suppose, that this is the most transparent administration in history. Every single thing Trump does
in a way, yeah.
from this point onward is to get himself reelected.
And maybe from the beginning, I would imagine.
Well, no, from the beginning it was to enrich himself, but now it's to get reelected as of the coronavirus.
I thought
so. What happens is that, as you pointed out, if schools aren't open, then parents don't know what to do because they have to stay home to watch their kids, and that can't get the economy started, and that means I won't get reelected. So therefore, we have to force the schools open so that you leave the kids there and you go back to work, and the economy gets better. And then everybody thinks I did a great job because the economy is roaring back, and then I get reelected. That's, simplistic, stupid, and exactly what he's doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's about it. He decided he wanted those schools open, as we all do. And then the hard part was, but how do you do it safely? And he said,
well, no,
why would you look at that?
He didn't hear about it.
No, we asked, well, okay, that's fine. How do you do it safely? And he said, I didn't even hear that question. What?
Right. But after I said it, then I see on Twitter this morning, Mark Murray from NBC Politics.
Yes.
Trump is making the same mistake with schools that he did when he called for the U.S. economy to reopen last spring. He's not putting safety first. And we saw how that played out with the spike in cases in the Sun Belt. I mean, it's just crystal clear what's going on here. And why anybody in the world would think this is going to work is nuts. But then again, I have to remind myself, you and everybody else, the White House people, are really stupid.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because they think it'll work.
Sometimes I wonder whether they think it'll work or whether they just say,
well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Not.
We have this wonderful, wonderful piece from Tim Miller in Rolling Stone, rounding up what Republicans really think. But let's do this first. So
like
this morning I put together, not only on the Pundit Roundup, but also this thread I had on schools, starting with Tom Inglesby. Now, Tom Inglesby has been studying pandemics and other threats to the United States for years. He was at Pittsburgh for a while. I worked with him briefly in 2009 on the flu pandemic. I know him as a subject matter expert. He's really good. And he had a thread yesterday about schools, which I think is worth going through briefly. Okay. He said the White House hosted an event called National Dialogue on Safely Reopening Schools. Many there talking about importance of schools in the U.S., but nobody's talking details about how to deal with the risks of reopen safely or what it will cost. Schools are extraordinarily important, and we should work to open them safely in the fall. But the meeting today had no one expressing concerns of so many parents and teachers, and nobody talking about what's known or not known about the science related to schools and coronavirus spread. Children are at far lower risk of serious illness than adults, but we still don't have enough evidence about how frequently children spread or how frequently children spread the disease to adults or adults in their homes. And the research should have been completed by now, but it hasn't, so we need to look at other indicators which paint a much more uncertain picture. And then he refers to a Center for Health Security article, filling in the blanks. National research needs to guide decisions about reopening schools. And since the administration did make this a priority, it hasn't been done. So Inglesby says various models have concluded the opposite. Some say schools will accelerate, others conclude they won't. This goes back, I have to say, back in 2009, we never were able to come to a conclusion about what to do about schools because there's so many good reasons to open them and there's so many good reasons to keep them closed. And in a pandemic that's a flu pandemic where kids are the vector and do get sick, even when it was more obvious that the kids were in trouble, you still couldn't decide. It's not surprising to me that with the kids being at less risk, but the community being at more risk, that you can't decide now. There have been some schools, Inglesby says, opened in other parts of the world which have had minimal and no reported outbreaks, which is reassuring, but they're operating in very low coronavirus prevalence settings, the opposite of the situation in the U.S. That's the whole point. You got to get the virus under control before these plans work. And there's also been some international outbreaks. Over 20 more schools closed as Israel seals largest daily virus rate in a month, for example.
Israel, we love
And he says, here's an example of a U.S. school outbreak that occurred following a school graduation event at Kathleen High School. 8 staff and family members reported with virus in the weeks following graduation. And then there was one at Queen Creek Boarding School. Some of the stuff could have been prevented. That was in Arizona. So there's a number of things that happen that make it much more difficult to try and keep this under control. Amy Walter writes about an Iowa school. Iowa district suspends summer school program after 2 days because of coronavirus symptoms. Okay. And so you try to do it, and it turns out it doesn't work. Craig Spencer, remember Craig Spencer, the L-Train bowling Ebola doctor.
Oh, yes.
Right, but he's also an MPH in public health, and he's an ER doc in New York and writes about this. And he says the moms want it if it's safe. The dads want it if it's safe. Everybody only wants it if it's safe. How can we trust any plan to safely reopen the schools when there isn't even a plan to safely reopen the country? As a doctor and a dad, I don't feel safe.
Yeah. Well,
right? Julia Kayyem, who's a national security expert writing in The Atlantic, reopening schools was just an afterthought. And another Atlantic piece is a better false possible. States with low rates of the virus, like Connecticut, are in a position to reopen the schools, but they have to do so very carefully with a focus on safety. And those that are in high virus areas like Florida are incredibly irresponsible to think about doing this. That's my addition.
Okay.
So we've known since 2009 what to do with schools is hard. But when you politicize it, you make it impossible. All the public health guidance that we have, it has to be done transparently to build trust. And the way Trump does it is the opposite, because he's clearly got re-election ulterior motives, and nobody can trust the guidance, which makes it harder and not easier. So look where we are in the pandemic right now to prove that point. The only solution is to let public health, and when it comes to the schools, the educators get together and lead, and do not have this being driven by politicians. They cannot be the drivers of this. Nobody trusts them. That should have been the solution from the beginning, and we haven't done it. So it's about time CDC and other people, take the lead. And, there's an article I just saw, I haven't read, in Daily Kos about it's time for Tony Fauci to speak out. That's true. And CDC as well. In fact, Alex Azar is starting to argue with CDC about what it means that CDC says school guidance has to be done carefully, and people need to wear masks and all that stuff. And the heads of these agencies are still trying to suck up the Trump at cabinet meetings like they did at this school thing where everybody had to go around the table and say how wonderful Trump was. And there's no way the public is buying this, which is why Trump is doing so bad politically. We'll get to that. So that's my morning rant.
That's a good one. And but we have more time. That's the thing. So is there something else I can get you angry about?
Sure.
Is there someone? Should we put you in a Costco and see if you can harass people who aren't wearing masks and videotape it? Something like that?
Yeah, we'll go out looking for Karens. It's so infuriating because it's so clear what to do and it's so clear they're not doing it. And that's why your introduction was just so on point, because what they're doing is trying to force the schools open for their own benefit, and it's going to fail, as Mark Murray said.
It's very interesting, and it's interesting that that they are, for whatever reason, having to resort to forcing schools open with something other than education policy, and I think it's largely because, real education policymakers know this is not a good policy idea, and we won't promulgate it, and we can't help you promulgate it. They've been able to use the power of the executive in the Trump administration to force people who know otherwise not to say so, but they have not been able to force people who know otherwise to say otherwise. That so far they haven't been able to force them to say something safe that isn't. Well, actually, they kind of have done that as well, haven't they? But they can't get the experts, the non-political appointees anyway, to give the seal of approval of their department to something that's known not to be safe, but they can get them to shut up about their findings that what's being proposed isn't safe. And it's really been kind of amazing. And although really the Federal Department of Education probably shouldn't have had a whole lot to do with this ordinarily anyway, because of how the limited powers that previous so-called conservative administrations have imposed on the Federal Department of Education.
Well, but I mean, just what's the brilliant move of bringing in subject matter expert and trusted person Betsy DeVos to help run this?
Right, yeah. There's nothing, no help there. Although did they address the problem of the rogue armed bears at all at this time?
I don't know if they had time to do that. She was too busy sucking up to Trump. But Twitter person Charles Allen, I don't know if he's listening to the show, but he just sent me this Paul Krugman tweet, which I'll read to you. The key to understanding pandemic policy is that while the people in charge are evil, they're also very stupid.
Well, that does help.
Yeah, so I think that's a good summary of all of this.
Pass that along in a little in our notes. I'll include that so everyone can read it to themselves several times.
Right. This is a USA Today editorial on the topic. Trump's mission accomplished moment is premature and deadly. We've not defeated COVID. And Twitter reminds us that it took years for people to start making fun of George W. Bush for mission accomplished. It's only taken a couple of months to do that with Trump. So
is that right?
Progress of sorts.
Okay. Yeah, it feels like it was.
But, you have to understand that what Trump is doing is failing. It isn't just getting mad at him for doing stupid stuff. It's not like we're afraid of what he's doing because it'll succeed. We're afraid of what he's doing because it's going to fail. But politically, there's nothing to fear here. I mean, this guy is just painting himself in a corner every day. And I thought we were out of corners, but.
Yeah. And he's
I guess it's not a square rim because he keeps finding him.
I don't know. All right. Well, let's see. Also in the coronavirus, and you could, again, and you probably will end up doing an entire show all on coronavirus or coronavirus adjacent stories, because what else is there?
What else is there? And again, that's an important point as well. Thank you so much for making it. Whatever is going on politically, whatever stupid things Trump decides to do, shiny objects, and make people chase this, and Kanye running for president, it doesn't matter. The coronavirus is the story. It will be the major story right through the election. You heard me say this months ago. The whole idea of these political people thinking that somehow it would go away and now we can concentrate on the economy and run a normal campaign was always fatuous. It was never going to happen. And it's so clear that it's not happening now. Florida's running out of ICU beds.
Yes.
Texas is running out of ICU beds. Arizona's running out of ICU beds.
They're done.
The cases are going up. The deaths are starting to go up. They're going to go up. We know there's a lag. You have to look at the end of July to see what's going on there. And you still have Trump supporters saying, yeah, look at the deaths. There aren't any deaths. There's 130,000 deaths. Dope.
Yeah, right.
And, the ones that are happening right now are based on what happened a month ago. So you're going to have to wait a month to see what's going to happen. It's just going to make you look more foolish. So just shut it down and get off the internet. Now, there's another pandemic-related piece here. This was in the New York Times this morning. Churches were eager to reopen. Now they're a major source of coronavirus cases.
What?
Like, nobody could see that coming.
Boing. Yeah.
Viruses infiltrated Sunday services, church meetings, and youth camps. More than 650 cases have been linked to reopened religious facilities. And so, remember, this is his base.
Yes, that's
the reason they open
true.
is because they're his base, and he told them to.
Yeah. And, of course, there was extra incentive. God will protect us from the virus.
You did a show a couple of weeks ago about the pastors getting knocked off.
Yes. Right. That hasn't been as much in the news lately,
because now it's the congregants.
Yeah, right.
And
the lagging indicators.
To focus on any one story.
Yeah. We don't know where the pastors picked up the virus, but as soon as they got back into the church and started, spraying all over everybody else, they all got sick. And now we find out about these things. All right, well, that's true. I happened to catch that one. That was parked in there. There's also news from Brazil, the site of the second largest outbreak in the world, behind us, of course, where their own president. Now, I think this is the second time that I've heard announced that Jair Bolsonaro has got coronavirus. The first time he denied it on Facebook, and I wasn't sure I believed him, but then he didn't appear to retreat to the hospital for any number of weeks, so maybe it was true that he didn't have it. But now he says he does. So he's not only testing positive, but positively acknowledging that he's tested positive. So that's of some interest, too, for people who are waiting for that to happen.
And then as far as California goes, and to a certain extent Arizona, but this is happening a little bit more in California, down by the border with Mexico, there's a number of American expats who have started to get sick, but their insurance is still in the United States.
Aha. Yeah,
And
what does
so
that
they're
mean?
overwhelming the border hospitals and having to be transferred to places like Los Angeles,
Wow.
which is only making the Los Angeles problem even worse.
Fantastic.
So again, these Americans, you know.
Can we
So,
build a
no,
wall
the wall
against
won't
Americans?
help keep them out. That's not the
Damn.
deal there.
Shoot.
And
Why not?
just, again, to get the point, all of your plans belong to us, except after you start having higher rates of coronavirus in the community, every single plan you made starts falling apart for reasons you didn't anticipate.
Yeah. Well, that's
what happens in a
game.
pandemic, you know,
Right.
and so you have to plan for your plan failing.
Okay. Well, but then I see what happens. That plan falls apart too. I knew
Right.
it.
That's why you have surge plans, and that's why you have emergency plans. And again, the frustrating part at this particular point in time is, despite all of this, the three dummy governors, Arizona
Abbott
and Florida and Texas,
Ducey
are still
and
at various
DeSantis.
and sundry levels refusing to take responsibility for this. DeSantis, of course, is the
I
worst.
learned that from Trump.
But even in Arizona and Florida, the governors there aren't giving their local people power to shut stuff down.
Yeah.
And they keep arguing, no, I'm the authority here. You only can do it when I say to do it, and I don't want to do it because I'm a Republican and I want to get Trump reelected, so you have to open the economy. It all goes back to that. It's all political. And again, you're having the political people drive this, and it's just a huge mistake. Huge.
Yes. Right. He did stop saying that, but I would like to know how did we train him, or did anybody do it on purpose to stop saying huge? He did stop doing that. If he can learn, I'd like to know about how.
He still says Gina.
That's true too. I think he probably thinks that's funny, but I'm not certain. I would like to look into that. That's something we need to spend some time on the side. Yeah, they all are. They're pushing ahead in their eagerness to position themselves, I guess, as mini Trumps and perhaps as Trump's successor. Maybe they have some designs on running for president, but
Or they want their Republicans in their states to have an advantage. And, you know, it's all going to backfire. You know, it's just as clear as crystal that's going to happen. We'll do more politics after the break.
okay, well, hang on for that. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There's more politics, as it turns out, and some of it, if you try hard, you can leave the link to coronavirus out of it if you want to. Although we may just try and demonstrate our earlier point by finding links back to it, but we'll make that a sideshow. What else have we got on tap for the morning, Greg?
Well, let's see. I do want to. I don't know if you saw them, but Montana.
I never saw them.
Is having some fantastic public service announcement PSAs
No.
about the virus. I just sent them to you, but they're fantastic. Right? They have regular, like, manly man Montanans people wearing various and sundry things, like a guy in camo for bow hunting.
Oh, yeah. See, they like masks.
Right?
There you go.
Montanans wear
that's
face
the point of
coverings
these.
all the time, preventing diseases like bow hunting. Only people can see you.
That's true. And also,
Right? Here's the second one. This one is
cover yourself
a
with
guy
the
wearing ski goggles and such.
Yeah.
All masked up. Montanans wear face coverings all the time, preventing
That's right.
diseases like skiing with no chance of orthopedic injury.
Yeah. Oh, preventing disease is like skiing. I thought you were like preventing diseases like skiing. That's not
Right?
disease.
Montanans wear face coverings all the time. There's a guy ski doing here with the goggles
Snow
and all
machines.
snow machined up, right? Preventing
That's
diseases like
insane.
February, only warmer.
These are good.
You're great. And then there's a guy all masked up for fishing. I don't know why.
I think
But it says
mosquitoes.
Montanans wear face coverings all the time, preventing diseases like fishing, only you never catch anything.
You never catch anything. That's clever too.
I mean, they're
thought
great.
that was
And they're
bad
just,
at
the
first,
point is, it's brilliant messaging, as Anat Shankar-Osario says, brilliant messaging, social proof demonstrating that people like you do the thing we're trying to get you to do among the most effective approaches to shape behavior. That's why it's so important that Trump wear a mask. That's why it's so aggravating that he doesn't. Also, more effective to cue and not mandate action, you want people to adopt. Do as I do, not as I say.
Yeah.
So, all of this is the role that government people have. Public health people have to set the lead in terms of this is why we're doing this for public health. Government people come in and say, yes, that's true. I support my public health person. Watch me wear a mask. That's where they come in. They model behavior.
That's right.
They shouldn't be calling the
This
shots
is really
about what
something.
to do, except when you have competing things. Like if the educator said one thing and the public health people said another, then it's the governor's job to sort of resolve that. But if everybody's telling you the same thing, it's not up to the governor to say, no, because of politics, I don't want to do those things.
Yes. All right.
Anyway, so
I like
that's
that.
the
That's a
background for all of this. Now, let's look at politics. As you may have heard, Joe Biden's actually doing quite well at the moment. This is a piece from
Yes.
Honest Graph, Dave Hopkins,
okay.
political
Switch.
scientist. I like to follow him. It's an old-fashioned, simple blog, but boy, he's got some good things to say.
That does look
And he wrote this on
old-fashioned.
Monday. Were Democratic voters right about Biden's electability? This comes at a time, by the way, that there's an article in Upshot saying that the Democratic Party is incredibly united. Like if you look at Elizabeth Warren's voters, for example, 96-0, they're supporting Biden. If you look at Bernie's voters, it's similar numbers, although not quite zero. There is
yes, that's true.
cross pressure
Not
on
zero.
the left. Everybody's uniting around Biden. And Hopkins asked the question that the idea that there's often a difference between the candidate you love the most and the candidate who has the best chance to win is a long-standing fixture of nomination politics, especially in the Democratic Party. But the assumption that electability is a quality shared by some potential nominees more than others was disputed more than usual this year. The idea is Trump is so weak anybody could beat him, to summarize what he's trying to say here. Okay? And layered on top of this familiar debate over whether a trade-off exists between electability and ideological purity was another set of concerns about candidates' social identities. Many Democrats had deduced from the racist backlash after Obama's 2008 election and the unexpected defeat of Hillary Clinton in 2016 that non-white and female presidential candidates are likely to lose votes due to the persistence of popular prejudices. Even though they supported the general goal of increasing the demographic diversity of the nation's office-holding class, a number of Democratic primary voters proceeded to draw the natural conclusion that nominating a white male presidential candidate for the first time since 2004 would be the safer path, at least to ejecting the hated Trump from office. But the prevalence of this view dismayed some feminist commentators who continued to ascribe Trump's political rise to the prevalence of misogyny, and who objected when this argument was then cited as a justification for supporting a male nominee to oppose him.
Okay. I don't
So
remember
that's the tricky argument that they were making. We think that misogyny is why Hillary Clinton lost. Okay, well then let's nominate a male. No!
Okay. Yeah, I could see that being a
but
natural
if
reaction.
you nominate a female, you still have the same misogyny.
If you believe that, yeah. I mean, how do you not believe that it had something
That
to
was
do
a
with it?
circle that
But,
was
yeah,
never,
that's-
squared.
Yeah.
Okay, so despite these assertions, a coalition of the Democratic Party's most pragmatic constituencies, including African Americans, Southerners, upscale suburbanites, and senior citizens, ultimately rallied behind Joe Biden. And now that we're about midway between the point in March where Biden became the presumptive nominee and the date of the November election, it's time to reevaluate the electability debate.
Okay. We can have
Now,
that.
on the one hand, Biden hasn't been invisible, so whatever he's doing on his own, and he's winning according to the polls. And on the other hand, Biden's current success surely reflects the sinking fortunes of Trump's presidency more than any particular attribute or skill of his own. And because we lack access to the parallel universes in which other nominees were chosen, it's impossible to completely settle the electability debate. And there's still 4 months to go. which is still plenty of time for the prevailing dynamic to change. Although, as my friend Stu Rothenberg, who thinks this is a likely Biden election, said on Twitter, I'm pretty sure that on November 2nd, some people will still be saying there's a long way to go until the election.
Yeah,
okay.
well.
But there's still 4 months to go. Republicans have become concerned that Biden's status as an elderly white male who isn't a socialist means that the familiar playbook of accusing Democrats of supporting left-wing extremism or revolutionary social change won't work as well against him as it would have against other potential nominees. And then he brings the idea that actually what they're going to do is to pull that play on whoever his vice president is. Mm-hmm. And you could see that with Tucker Carlson going after Tammy Duckworth.
Yes, right. To no one's surprise. If you've been around long enough, that can't surprise you. If you're new to politics, like you're one of those Generation Z kids or late millennials that are just getting around to it and put down your avocado toast and engage, or whatever the stupid stereotype is. Yeah, this also has happened before. And it'll happen again, and next time you'll get to be the old-timer that says, I remember when they did that to Tammy Duckworth. Why are you surprised? So you have that to look forward to, kids.
Right. Look up Max Cleland if you want to see what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. So he's just warning people that it's going to be a nasty race, and just because Uncle Joe is like this sort of benign generic Democrat doesn't mean that the campaign in the fall isn't going to be nasty. It's just that if it doesn't work to run it against Uncle Joe, you're going to run it against Uncle Joe's vice presidential candidate, whoever that is. Sure. So in a sense, if you want to vet the vice presidential candidates to see how they do under pressure, well, that's what the Tucker Carlson attack is.
Yeah. We can check out how they respond.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I wonder how much.
And how did Tammy Duckworth respond? She said to Carlson, listen, if you want to walk a mile in my legs and see whether or not I love America, come at me.
Yeah. I mean,
she doesn't have any legs, by the way.
Yes, well, that's...
Just as a reminder.
That's the thing.
She's a decorated military veteran, and the idea that she doesn't love her country is absurd, and this isn't going to work. But there you have it. And then, against Kamala Harris, obviously, there'll be other stuff. And against Elizabeth Warren, there'll be other stuff. So whoever the vice presidential nominee is, you can expect that we're going to see a lot of that. So how well is it working? Here is Amy Walter from the Cook Political Report, nonpartisan, pretty well respected. And relatively conservative in terms of how they call elections, I might add.
Oh. Okay.
And their today's report, new July 2020 Electoral College ratings. This election is looking more like a Democratic tsunami than simply a blue wave. President Trump, mired in some of the lowest job approval ratings of his presidency, is trailing Biden by significant margins in key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And he's even running behind Biden in the firewall states of Florida and North Carolina. Trump has to have those states. I think he's more at risk for losing Florida than North Carolina, but he's working on losing both.
Good. Keep working.
So, that's, where things stand in regard to that. Mm-hmm. Here's one from Greg Sargent, which ties the first part of the show and the second part of the show together, because it's entitled, Trump is in deep trouble. His own allies are privately admitting why. CNN reports that Trump allies and top Republicans are, quote, only now coming to the realization, end quote, remember, they're stupid. That mask wearing will be key to containing the coronavirus's resurgence. With cases rampaging once again, White House officials are, quote, discussing taking a more active role in encouraging masks, end quote.
I'm glad they're
discussing. Now, gaze upon this and try not to slam your head violently into the nearest wall, Greg Sargent writes.
All right.
The bungled response has caused grave damage to the president's political outlook, with his reluctance on masks only deepening the impression that Trump is not taking the pandemic seriously. Many of Trump's closest allies now say in private that wearing a mask in public could help him appear more attuned to the crisis. They fear his failure to do so, and to encourage his supporters to follow suit could threaten the economic recovery Trump is counting on to fuel his reelection, because further outbreaks could roll back the reopenings he desperately needs to have a chance in November. This isn't just an admission that Trump's depraved refusal to take the coronavirus seriously continues undermining his reelection. It's also an admission that the story Trump has been telling about our current moment has it entirely backward. Trump's allies are admitting what numerous experts have said for months, in order to seriously get back on track to economic recovery, you have to tame the virus first, and they're admitting that this is a key reason he's in trouble. Now look at Florida. They insist on having a convention there.
That's what they say.
In the middle of this, they insist on opening the schools there. Duh. I mean, it's all of a piece. And so the reason that he's doing so badly is because he's incompetent. He's not going to change. And even if he decides to wear a mask tomorrow, that would be a wonderful thing for the country. But he's still pushing schools to open and doing all the other stuff you described at the top of the show in order to get himself reelected. And so there's no way that he's going to look like he's responsible and taking the pandemic seriously and acting like an adult, because he isn't for any of those things. He's not acting responsible. He's not taking it seriously. And he's not doing things other than try to further his reelection. And everybody in the world can see it.
Yes. Well, he's a horrible person and a horrible candidate.
And so says his niece. Now,
that's true.
This is Cam Easley from Morning Consult. The main reason Biden is crushing Trump among voters who dislike both candidates, their antipathy toward Trump is much stronger. So if you're looking at the hater vote,
that's me.
With unfavorable views of presumptive Democratic nominee Biden and Trump are 16 points more likely to have strongly negative feelings about Trump.
All right, that's not exactly.
So if you hate a vote, you hate Trump more.
I don't feel like I hate them both. But I feel like I hate enough for both of them, but it's all concentrated
exactly. Just
on
put
one
it all
guy.
on one candidate. You can do that.
Okay. Well, I still know what to do when voting time comes.
So that's the background that brings me to my favorite article of the day.
Oh, the best
It's
one.
in Rolling Stone. It's by Tim Miller, Never Trumper.
Oh, okay.
Who writes for The Bulwark, who's part of the Project Lincoln.
I see.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Let's see. I just got a tweet from one of my political friends who's telling me something about Wisconsin, so that's always worth looking at.
Is it that two people were accidentally shot in Fond du Lac?
Oh, no. It's that Cook Report thing that I was just reading. He just points out in the details, Georgia's a toss-up and Wisconsin is lean D.
Lean D. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes. I'll take it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, Tim Miller.
Tim
That's
Miller
right? Okay.
writes,
Got him.
what 9 GOP campaign consultants really think about Republicans' chances in November? The mood in MAGA land, every shred of evidence points to a likely ass-kicking.
Okay.
All right, given that that's the background, and we just
kick,
described
though.
why, this looks into how are they feeling, how are they describing it, how are they justifying it, and all that stuff. And before I go any further, you have to step back and say these are Republican professional political operatives. These are campaign people. These are POLs, okay?
Right.
So you'll have to read this story as if you're reading the Valachi papers, because what's going to happen is that they're going to be most upset about breaking omerta rather than anything else that's actually happening. That's going to be their focus.
All right.
Okay. So, shooting rubber bullet grenades at protesting priests, catastrophically botching the pandemic response, resulting in a public health and economic calamity, tweeting white power memes, ranting in front of empty arenas about he navigated a slippery ramp, being missing in action while his Russian benefactors put out a hit on American soldiers in Afghanistan. And by the way, there's an Ipsos poll out this morning saying 2/3 of the country think it's a big deal and they don't buy Trump's story.
Oh, good.
The last 3 months have been a political dumpster fire for Trump, and the flames have engulfed Republicans up and down the ballot. But while pockets of Republican resistance have roasted dear leader, elected officials in D.C. and their Svengalis in the consultant class have remained steadfast. So that's who he's interviewing here.
Okay.
These swamp creatures were never the biggest Trumpers in the first place. His initial campaign team was an assortment of D-listers and golf course grunts rather than traditional GOP ad men. So why, as Trump's numbers plummet, are these establishment rhinos continuing to debase themselves to protect somebody who's politically faltering and couldn't care less about them?
I don't know.
So he reached out to 9 of his former allies and rivals to try to talk to them and find out. And this is sort of like, okay, how are you guys in the West Virginia diner feeling now?
Oh, all right.
Except in a group of people who always hated Trump and went with him anyway. Like, this is like trying to figure out with Hugh Hewitt, what the heck are you doing? Why is Byron York still enabling him? How do you find people who you thought at one point might have been portraying themselves as classic conservatives, and all of a sudden, like, you're nuts? What's going on here? So what I found in their answers was one part Stockholm Syndrome, one part survival instinct. They all may not love the president, but most share his loathing for his enemies on the left in the media and the apostate never-Trump Republicans with a passion that engenders an alliance with the president, if not a kinship. So they hate the same people, in other words. And even among those who don't share the tribalistic hatreds, they perceive a political reality driven by base voters in the president's crap posting that simply does not allow for dissent. As one put it, there are two options. You can be on this hell ship or you can be in the water drowning. So I give you the view from the USS Hellship, first the political state of play, then the psychological.
All right.
All right?
Yeah.
It's a wonderful article. It really gets into the mind of a Trump supporter.
So somebody had to do it.
Well, you got to take a shower afterwards.
They always say that.
It's true. What are they thinking? How could they do that? Well, at least this explains it. So the impact of Trump's disastrous 3 months on down ballot candidates was best summed up in the first text message I got back. Could you use a poop emoji for all my comments, please? Okay. Every shred of evidence points to a likely ass kicking in the fall. It's as bad as it gets. Right now, most campaigns are thanking baby Jesus every day the election isn't held today. I've got Trump down in Texas and Danes down in Montana. It's certainly better than public polling, but it ain't good. These are all different comments. I told very high-ranking people in the Trump administration it hasn't been like this since October of 2006, when Bush's numbers were tanking over fallout from Iraq, Katrina, and the Mark Foley scandal.
Oh, yeah.
But in 2006, Republican candidates could strategically distance themselves. That won't work in 2020. As Trump's numbers are plummeting with some demos, they're solidifying or improving among his core support demographic, which makes running afoul of Trump fatal in the eyes of these strategists. Okay. So for practical reasons, they feel like they can't desert him. Why? According to one, you have 25% of the state is rural, and Trump gets Saddam Hussein level numbers here, 87% and 25% of the state.
Look what happened to that guy.
This is Texas. Cornyn gets 69.
Okay.
Trump gets 87.
Man.
And so Cornyn can't find a place to break because he can't put that in jeopardy. He can't afford to lose that 25% that are Trump people. He'll never win.
Yeah.
Because the other 75% are never going to vote for him. The only way he wins is to capture that 87% of the 25.
Yeah, we should tell him that he can do it, and he should absolutely give it a try. And I don't know,
well,
he won't believe it
saying, but they're not going to listen. You have to understand why they're not listening. This same calculus pervades no matter the race, no matter the district, no matter the geography. The operatives insist that the pro-Trump zealotry the president's supporters demand makes it far more difficult for candidates to win over anybody else.
And agreement at last. I've been waiting for her to chime in, really. So, okay, well, we'll figure out what's going on there, and neighbor going to work or
a consultant who advises a challenger in a swing House seat that Hillary Clinton carried. All
right. Does she have some objection to Hillary?
Garbage guys indicated they thought they had less ability to distance from Trump than those who were in safer, more magnified districts. No dissent is tolerated, and if my candidate is going to win, it's going to be by 1 or 2%. They can't afford to lose a single vote. In fact, some candidates in competitive House seats are going the other direction because of what it takes to win a primary. A different consultant said, my candidate didn't vote for Trump, but we're running ads right now about being the biggest Trump supporter you ever saw.
Oh. That would seem, well, okay. I guess that's politically what they have to do, but that is interesting. What a position to be in.
The idea of distancing, if it's discussed, is discussed very quietly, one-on-one. You wouldn't talk about it on a conference call. Maybe somebody would, but let's just say it hasn't happened yet, and I'm on all those calls. So sit with that for a second, Tim writes. The idea of separating from Trump is so verboten in GOP circles that the best consultants won't even talk about talking about it for fear of being stigmatized and losing potential clients working on other campaigns. Right? In the meantime, these strategists are left with the same strategy they've spent 3 years honing, hope and hiding. Right? Yeah. Suggestions that maybe, just maybe, in the face of these headwinds, they should try to win back some of the suburban vote and claim their own destiny, rather than grabbing a middle seat on Trump Airlines and hope for the best, is met with derision. Trump sucks the oxygen out of the room. You can't do it. You can't run independent. Can't happen.
Okay. I believe it.
As another put it, the press and the Twitterati, they don't know a frickin' thing.
Yeah. Well. Right. Okay.
All right. Then there's the mindset. Okay, we haven't worked for anybody who seriously think this guy has it all together, referring to Trump. While at some level that's true, I'm sure some, if not most, Republican consultants snicker at Trump from time to time, but in private, at the bar, quietly, off the record. But what I found was underneath the surface, eye rolling at Trump and hat tipping to the record on judges was an emotional alliance with the president that's deeper than they might let on. A compartmentalization of the badness of the orange man, which is set aside in favor of a deep and visceral hatred of the president's enemies.
Okay. The second time that's come up.
The listeners here, they hate you. They hate you with a passion that you hate Trump.
Yes.
You're never going to come to common ground with them. And that's the group that, even as I advocate talking to swing voters and talking to marginal voters, don't waste your time on these folks. They hate you. These are the people, by the way, who are online when we're talking about the pandemic, and Houston and Phoenix and Miami are under threat and under siege and crisis. Will tweet at you. Yeah, but look at the death rate, you stupid lib.
Yep, I see those.
Why? Why are you tweeting the dead? Tell me Fauci just said it's a false narrative. Yeah, but it's Trump's narrative.
Yeah.
And it's all they have. So they're going to keep tweeting that at you, even as the death rate is starting to go up.
Yes, and you don't have to
as
tell them
everybody
it's
who's an expert in this is telling you it's going to take a month to see it. But it's going up now anyway, which tells you how bad it's going to be in a month. And they're still tweeting that at you because you suck, lib.
Yeah. You're supposed to waste your time quoting them statistics back, to which if they're real, they'll say they're fake. And if, there's no point in spending time on them. That's true.
Right. And it's just funny because a lot of the ones I get have like 14 followers and they've made 9 comments.
Right. And they have 85 digits in there.
Yeah, it's, Charles 72 97 43 6,
Right.
But for several others,
Omaha.
Trump was someone they related to, a shadow side who was an emotional outlet for their anger. They're mad rightly at people like Ben Sasse.
Oh, yeah. Did we ever decide that?
Ben Seesaw, who acts like they take the moral high ground only to hide under the hay bales until the primary's over. They're mad at people like Jeff Flake, who moralized while angling for a new job in corporate America. They're mad at the Lincoln Project for attacking innocent GOP senators. There's no coming back for these Lincoln Project mofos. It doesn't matter next. They're madder at these people than they are at Trump.
Yeah, well, by the way, don't look to us. We're not keeping you. You guys got to find a new home when you're done.
And we're not donating to you. We're just enjoying the ads.
Right.
They are mad at the media. There's so much hyperbole around Trump and around these events, and it goes so thermonuclear outrage every frickin' 3 or 4 days, the scar tissue built up on what is a big thing anymore. And they're really, really mad at the media. There's not a moment where they're not in your face. It's not bullshit that they're a leftist institution. The mask is on. People are dying all over the country, and the media saying, we're not going to give you both sides on this. We're not going to let you spin. Oh, well, then I hate you. You're leftists.
Right. Well, sorry. It's okay. I don't need to make them happy.
I'm not going to bow to every liberal altar on this. They're really, really mad at the left. Woke culture has created no other lane for you but to support him on the 1 or 2 things you like, and then you have to countenance all the rest of the bullshit. And so they remain passengers on a hell ship with no control over where it takes them, emotionally tied to a man who shares their enemies, convinced that his ills are outweighed by theirs, politically chained to a president who is the key to voters they need, unable and unwilling to attempt to do anything else, and resigned to that fate. Is this some sort of deathbed like, oh, look back at my life, I wish I had fought Trump? I'm not there, said one of them. And so the hell ship sails on. So that gives you an idea into what they're thinking and what's in their heads and why they are never going to break with him.
Well, that's likely true. And, it's understandable, I guess, on their point. And certainly enemy of the enemy thing has been around with us for a long time.
Right. So we'll take the never Trumpers because they're the enemy of the enemy. And you don't have to elect them. You don't have to give them tons of money so that they can build up a machine that can then attack you in 2022. You don't have to do that. But enjoy what you're seeing and understand what they're doing. They're getting into Trump's head, and his people hate them. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. As long as it wastes
they hate
their
everybody,
time.
so it's not unique. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, that's true. And we should probably we're happy that Tim Miller used up a lot of their time on the telephone. He should continue doing that and get them agitated with one another and keep them angry. That's fine. Oh, and speaking of the the Project Lincoln folks, we should take note of their. You can't say their latest ad and keep saying it for more than 6 hours because they keep putting out ads almost hourly. But yesterday's big smash hit, or at least maybe Monday's big smash hit, was their piece that they produced apparently for the audience of one, which is a new phenomenon here in D.C. We see all sorts of things produced so that they'll be seen on television or on the internet by Trump. But they had that, I guess their latest ad was the one that was, I guess the initial titling of it on the screen was what? Trump has a loyalty problem. Did you see this one? This was describing, I guess, all of the people. I was reminded of it by reading through this article with you.
The Whispers one.
The whole, right, yes. Okay, is that what they titled it? The theme Whispers. Of which was, all the Republicans out there are laughing about you behind your back. This was literally aimed at one person. It said you right in there. It's just supposed to get under Trump's skin. I saw a lot of people noting this isn't even really an ad. It doesn't persuade, like, who's the target of this? Who gets persuaded how to vote by this?
Trump is the target of all of their ads.
Literally all that they've done. And this one is the most explicit of them. Attention, Donald Trump. We are talking to you. You personally suck. And everyone knows it. So that was kind of remarkable. I don't think that they spent any money on it.
They're talking about you behind your back. They're writing books about you.
Well, now
they're in your head. We're in your head. What are you going to do about
it? Scream and have public policy forums where people praise
because you just described the other side of the coin.
I've done it again.
I described to you what's going on with the Trump people, or the people who have at least tied themselves to him in terms of what they're thinking about Project Lincoln. And the Project Lincoln people are telling us what they think of these people.
Oh, yeah.
Get in your head. You stink. You suck. Everybody hates you. You want to hate us? Let me tell you about what all of you are saying about each other.
Yeah, well, I hope it has the psychological impact that they're hoping for. More time it wastes. So
this is how you approach people who are just raging mad about everything.
Yeah, I guess just keep them raging mad. Wave a red cape in front of them, and then like Bugs Bunny, you pull it away, and there's an anvil behind it.
We do it differently. We're not Republicans, but this is how Republicans have a Republican Civil War.
Yeah, so we get to watch, I guess. All right, don't send them any money. Just remember that. Thanks, Greg. We will catch up again tomorrow because more stupid things will happen. And you'll round them up.
Oh, man, it's only Monday.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I have got a new appreciation for those ads in Montana. I think those are some great ideas. The only thing missing from them, of course, is the militia guys in their skull masks. I'm surprised that they didn't get included, but I think it was wise that we not include them in anything. This was really a good idea. Well done, well executed. Nicely, the art is beautifully done as well. So, very interesting idea, very interesting approach. Although, let's see if I can scroll back and find it. I did see a comment roll by where someone was saying, as a Montanan, which made me say, a Montanan, I have to speak to this Montanan, that they were somehow disappointed in this, or this infuriates me. Here it is. When, let's see, what do we got here? This is from Twitter user Me and My Dog Too, right? The TOO, not like the second person named Me and My Dog. And commenting here, let's see, anything I need to pick out from the profile here? Regular person. Good. That's who I need to hear from on this here. As a Montanan, and not the most famous Montanan or YouTuber Montanan or anything like that. A regular Montanan. As a Montanan, this infuriates me. This collection of articles. Why? Bullock's refusal to mandate masks will kill people, as his agencies gaslight about returning to normal and waste time with BS messaging. That's interesting. I mean, I can see what you mean. I mean, clearly, I'm sure as a Montanan, you say, well, I'll take it for what it's worth that they're now telling people to wear masks. But I guess, in the face of, no pun intended, in the face of the governor having wasted an inordinate amount of time on this I guess for a state agency, is that who's sponsoring this thing? For a state agency to now be doing this messaging after the governor spent all this time, it just sets up, I guess, a parallel system to our own stupid federal government response to this, with one part, the supposedly less influential part of the government saying, yeah, everybody should mask up, and then the most influential part of the government saying, I hate masks, or gaslighting on masks, or saying that masks are somehow unmanly or un-MAGA-like, or whatever you want to put it. Undoing all of the good messaging of, it's a beautifully produced ad campaign, but is it going to outweigh what damage the governor has done? Good point, right? We can't ignore that and can't expect people to switch midstream. And we may now be spending, I don't know how much money on this beautifully produced ad campaign that will do little to nothing, even though by logic it should work. But it's been pre-undone, as a matter of fact, by mistakes from the governor's office. Although Montana is one of those places where they do, I guess this would qualify as a place with low COVID prevalence, as we were discussing when the topic was the reopening of the schools. And I suppose masking, similarly, you could arguably get away with it. The numbers, being what they are. But again, I think cogent public policy making is, I think you do better when the policy is more or less uniform, when it comes to something like masking anyway. When the policy is more or less uniform and we can still play the we're all in this together card, and especially, with customized messages like this to Montanans. Don't worry, you're covering your face routinely all the time when it's good for you. Now we're asking you to cover your face because it's good for everyone else, and you won't do it because you say, I can't breathe. You can't breathe when you got your face covered for snowmobiling or skiing. You can't breathe, supposedly, when you're out there hunting. You can't breathe when you're out there fishing, something like that. And you've, by the way, I don't know if everybody caught that, but I think that he's got his face covered for bugs and mosquitoes while he's out there fly fishing, standing in the river. You literally will have those bugs just fly in your mouth unless you cover it up with the cool thing that they've got. I think they think maybe the medical type masks make them look foolish, but somehow a buff scarf or one of the tactical camo face coverings like the deer hunters, the bow hunting people have got on, apparently that would be cool enough for them, and maybe you can convince them, wear that. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care if you wear a differently shaped mask. It's just got to be a face covering. But maybe in the school opening context, you might be able to talk about the low prevalence of the virus, and, you may be able to open schools in Montana differently than you're able to open them elsewhere. The numbers over at the Worldometers tell us a little bit about this. I did tweet something about it, just kind of keeping track of these things. I did note last night there are only 11 states left in the entire country with total case counts of COVID-19 that can be expressed in fewer than 5 digits. That is to say, lower than 10,000. And we passed the threshold a couple of days ago. It's now the case that every state, we'll include the District of Columbia there because we think it ought to be a state. Every state in America has got more than 1,000 cases now. The last holdouts of Alaska and Hawaii, isolated as they are, and isolated and low in population as they are, have both crossed that threshold. Hawaii still at the bottom of the list in terms of the lowest numbers of total cases, now at 1,071 cases. But only Idaho, South Dakota, New Hampshire, these are the orders in which they appear, descending by number of total cases. Idaho has 8,539, according to Worldometers here. Then South Dakota, New Hampshire, North Dakota, West Virginia, Maine, Wyoming, Montana, Vermont, Alaska, and Hawaii. And it should surprise no one that these are pretty much our lowest population states. I think in terms of actual ranking and actual population size, Delaware and Rhode Island fit in the group of the 10 smallest states. But these 11 states overlap pretty nicely with the lowest population states. And so I guess in that sense, no surprise that they also have the lowest number of coronavirus cases. They have the lowest number of people to infect with coronavirus, but also in many cases they are rural or far removed from any large outbreaks or sitting out in the middle of the ocean in the case of Hawaii. And but all of that is changing. And with things spiking, I suppose you may shortly see, Idaho is at the top of the list. How long will it be before they make it to 10,000 cases? Hard to say. Let's say, maybe we can look at their, like historically, in this chart, the easy-to-use Worldometers thing, I can only go back to yesterday, but a couple of you have shared with me other sources where you can go a little bit further back. But let's see. Yesterday, how did Idaho do in terms of new cases? New cases reported yesterday, 487. So that gives us some indication. Actually, I think if you click on Idaho, you can get a new daily new cases read here, and you got to mess with their bar graph a little bit. 487 cases yesterday, 319 cases the day before, 363, 376, 401. So I think in the neighborhood of 350 to 450 it's been of late, I guess since July or end of June here. End of June they spiked and got 433 cases. The last reported day in June was the 27th when they had 171. But so July has been pretty, hot for them on this. So I guess what's the answer there? We flip back and go back to where they stand, 8,539, running at about 400 or so a day means that they get to the 9,000 mark perhaps today. And then a couple more days. So, maybe like this time next week, Idaho drops off the list of the 11, and that's left with, then it'll be topped by South Dakota. Now, how is South Dakota doing? South Dakota, of course, I guess they might see the Mount Rushmore event spike. They've also been suffering with meat processing plant spikes of late. Let's see, their big spike. In fact, their big spikes were in April 15th when I think they were seeing the meat processing plant things. And then I guess they got another round of that early in May. But otherwise, they've been holding pretty steady, though. It looks like up to now, before we see the Mount Rushmore numbers come in, it's been, let's see, July 7th was 58 cases, July 6th, 42, 35, 50, 85, 67, 62, 48. So more in the neighborhood of 50 or so a day. So it could take them, if all things otherwise being equal, it might have taken them quite a while to get from where they are in the 7,000s, the low 7,000s, up to 10,000. But I wonder if the Mount Rushmore event begins to change those things. We will see that. Let's see. I guess we'll start to see that in the next 2 weeks or so, and whether their numbers spike. Now, by the way, so next on the list, this is really interesting. It's almost as if this was being done on purpose. Idaho, I guess, is going to make it there all on their own. But like we said, next up would be South Dakota, and Trump did his best to sabotage that with a super spreader event over the July 4th weekend. Next on the list, New Hampshire with 5,932 cases. And where is the next Trump event scheduled? New Hampshire. That seems really weird. Like they did it on purpose to make sure that everybody had plenty of coronavirus to go around, as if not only they didn't care about your health, but they actively wanted to kill you with it. Not Trump surrendering in the fight against coronavirus, but Trump switching sides in the coronavirus. Very Benedict Arnold-like in this. Now, it looks, though, like daily new cases have been falling for a while and then holding relatively steady in New Hampshire. They had a early May spike and a late May spike, but since then have been falling, with individual crazy days here and there. But I guess the last couple days have been in the below 50 range, 18, 17, 40 for July 5th. And then 35, 20, 22, 13. So it could take them a good long time. That's just, I think, a function of the size of the state and how few people are in it. Maybe it's because they're all in the state legislature. And seeing state legislators catch the virus has just been a few and far between. Let's see. Let me think about what the other states are facing here. North Dakota, no rallies scheduled for North Dakota anytime soon. They have 3,898, and my guess is that they'll be remaining under 10,000 for quite some time. Their numbers have been also in the neighborhood of about 50 for a while and holding steady for a while. Next on the list, West Virginia, I have a feeling we might see them sort of rocket up the charts. They are at 3,615, but reported 110 new cases already today. So that doesn't bode well. And they've been seeing, it looks like they're on the rise. 110 reported this morning, 63 cases yesterday, 107 the day before, 130 the day before that, 79, 73, 74. And then, I would say in early to mid-June, they were doing in the teens and 20s. And now here in July, we're looking at 75 to 100 a day and rising. So West Virginia on its way up the charts. Just might as well fill this out here. Maine next. And isn't there an event coming up in Maine as well? Well, it doesn't follow directly in line behind New Hampshire, but I thought I heard about that. And they're reporting some additional cases early this morning too. Let's take a look at their chart. Not quite as bad, though late June hasn't been good. July 4th weekend, we saw things drop off. We'll have to see whether they're reporting rebounds from the July 4th lull or not. They may remain under 5 digits for some time to come. And then Wyoming, Montana, there we are, Montana, Vermont, Alaska, Hawaii, no reports so far this morning, and my guess is that their numbers remain relatively low, though I can see they're growing a little bit into the high 20s, low 30s in Wyoming. And, all right, Montana, since we started with them, we'll continue on. Oh, yeah, look at them. They seem to be having quite some growth. For most of let's say late April through late May, they were doing single digits and zeros after having had a March 30th through April 15th spike. But for them, a spike is going to 20 cases a day. But then in, I'd say, mid-June, things appear to have changed, going from a June 16th daily case count of 5 to then 16, 25, back down to 11 for the weekend, 32, 19, 23, 23, 37, 26, 23, 11. You can see this goes. And now, where are we? June 29th, 56, 48, 49, 67, 45, 39, 45, 37, and July 7th, 78. So we're seeing a mini bump there in Montana. I don't think that's going to send them rocketing up the charts, but I guess that's why they're putting out the word that, hey, maybe you ought to wear some masks after all, because for all of our protesting that we didn't need it, we're starting to see some weird spikes. Vermont, Alaska, and Hawaii are last. We'll leave them alone for time being and move on to some of the other important stories of the day, including the most important, least important story I have ever heard about Donald Trump. That was actually in Bill's morning tweet all the way from Portland, Maine, where they remain once again with a count of under 5,000 and under 5 digits in their total case count. He was noting the story of the day yesterday, excerpted from Mary Trump's now released book, all of the maneuverings in court having been mooted by this. And I don't know, the story that seemed to somehow catch fire was Mary Trump's accusation that, if I have the story right, I didn't really read I don't have the book, I don't intend to read the book, I'll read the excerpts. All I can tell you for sure is that the thing that caught on with people was that Donald Trump was accused of having cheated on his SATs in order to facilitate his transfer from, I forget where he was going to college, to Wharton, the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. I keep confusing which school it was that he transferred out of and insulting that other school when I get the name wrong. But, yeah, and I think I gleaned from watching people discuss it that I guess, was it that he paid someone else to go and take the tests in his place? I mean, again, in the grand scheme of things, say versus murdering 130,000 Americans, or allowing the Russians to put bounties on the head of our soldiers, or withholding international aid to the victims of Russian aggression so that they would fake up a story about Joe Biden that he could use to win re-election. Versus all of that, cheating on the SAT is not very high on the list, but for some reason that really incensed people, and it may be because of the familiarity most people have with the pressure of getting ready for the SATs and how much is riding on the SATs for most people, and the idea of a person like Donald Trump paying his way out of having to deal with it, and then going on to claim to be the smartest guy in the world with the highest IQ, and he's a super genius, and doctors want to know how it is that he knows so much, is probably kind of galling. But anyway, there you have it. It is on record, and we thought we'd share the story. Let's see. Other things that I ought to share with you. I did see a tweet this morning, but no news story accompanying it. So that makes it an easy thing for me to report, even though I won't be able to fill you in all aspects of it. Chris Jansing, senior national correspondent and anchor of where? MSNBC. Yes. Tweeting here, and so we'll say reporting because he's a reporter. Nearly half the employees at an Arizona, yes, ICE detention center tested positive for COVID-19. Not a surprise, both because, one, it's in Arizona, and two, it's an ICE detention center, where the policy appears to be give as many of the detainees COVID-19 as possible. And, of course, normal people said, not only is that horrible and inhumane in and of itself, but even if you're one of those people that will say, I don't care about the detainees, surely you'll care about the staff working there and the guards, right? And the answer is no, they won't. So nearly half the employees have tested positive for COVID-19, with one of the guards dying, which I haven't heard a lot of grief expressed about, to be honest. 2 employees and 14 migrants tell their reporters Jacob Soboroff, NBC News and MSNBC News, of course, and Julia Ainsley, similarly, obviously, of NBC News. They are told, the two of them, that a staff shortage has detainees in cells without access to showers and other necessities. So, everybody, the basic instruction was, of course, wash up, wash your hands, keep clean. And I guess, nope, not able to do that. And no surprise, gigantic outbreak in the detention center and spreading, as predicted, to the very people that you would have thought that Trump-supporting racists would be worried about, but in reality they don't care about, because as long as I don't have it, I don't really give a damn. And besides which, thanks for keeping all those people in prison, but you're pretty yucky and we don't like you very much. I'm going to go back to my gated community now. Please stay out. And if one of you heroes guarding the folks in ICE detention comes around here, I will call the cops on you. I don't care very much about you in reality. All right. So now that we have that straightened out, let's see, another COVID-19 related story, because as I said, it's all about COVID-19 these days. Quick hit, we'll say, confirming the conventional wisdom, but a story from out of Michigan. Health Department finds no link between COVID-19 cases and protests so far. Let's see which kinds of protests we're talking about, because there were several of different kinds all over Michigan in the last couple of months. Ashley Graham reporting this for WLNS Channel 6 in Michigan. Where in Michigan? I don't know. Does it tell me? So one of you will tell me, I'm sure. Okay, well, anyway, here's the story. Thousands of people have protested at the Capitol this year. We saw them, some of them with guns and everything, demanding the state reopen. And, of course, there were others later on demanding an end to police brutality and even demanding to give haircuts on the lawn. I don't know why you had to demand haircuts on the lawn. I mean, haircuts, yes. Why they had to be on the lawn, the lawn of the Capitol or anybody's lawn? I don't know. They were just trying to be fun. But the Ingham County health officer says there's no evidence of a spike linked to any protest. You go back to the protest, which started as early as late April, Linda Vale says, and never did we see an upswing in cases related to those protests. Investigators trace where each COVID-positive person has been and who they've been in contact with during a certain amount of time. Vale says it's no different with protests. If you're there with other people that you know, perhaps, and we get a hold of those people, she says. If a protester does test positive, the health department looks at the number of cases they can confirm and trace so they can properly inform the public. You've got one person that was there and tested positive that may or may not have resulted in any additional exposures, Vale says. But if you start to find a group of people at some sort of organized event, then we do know there's been an exposure, and then we do have public notification. This doesn't really clear anything up in terms of her quotes, but okay. The health department can't put a limit on how many people exercise their right to protest at any one time in any one place. Vale says it's the governor's call. But as a health officer, she urges everyone participating to keep wearing masks and using hand sanitizer and to stay home if they feel sick. Okay. And for some reason, there's another date line down here at the bottom. It looks to me like, I don't know whether is that an indication that they updated it, or I think they might have just accidentally cut and pasted the Lansing, Michigan date line down to the bottom. For whatever reason, this, I guess, should have been the opening of the piece. Maybe that's why it sort of felt abrupt. As health officials continue to track COVID-19 cases statewide, the Ingham County Health Department says they have not seen a link between cases of the virus and protests in recent months. Ingham County Health Officer Linda Vale, there we are, says her department, which covers the state capital, has not seen any increased trends related to the protests. The capital has been the site of multiple protests since the spring. 6 News, as they call themselves, will have a full report tonight. I suppose that's probably actually tonight, with details about how the cases are tracked on air and online. So whatever that's supposed to mean. You don't have to watch to figure it out. I wonder, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So the body that I started out reading was the update on this. It's one of those weird formatting things on the online news sites that they really never figured out exactly how to deal with these things. But all right, very interesting. And I guess I don't know whether they felt like they needed to do this as a both sides thing, like that the early reopen the place protests didn't result in any additional infections, and neither did Black Lives Matter. I think Michigan's protests were pretty unmasked, clearly. And then there was a lot of people yelling and screaming in the faces of the cops, but the cops in that one were wearing masks. That's interesting. And then by the time the BLM protests came around, the protesters were masked and the cops weren't. And that was kind of interesting. So I don't know whether there's any real data that can be gleaned out of that about the efficacy of at least half of the participants being masked, if not all of them, or at least each, sides anyway. I don't know. But I guess that is a little bit surprising too, because at first I was going to say, we've all been prepared for the finding that outdoor gatherings might be less dangerous because of the airflow and circulation, etc. But a good part, the famous part of the Michigan protests for reopening the economy was the part that took place indoors. So that is kind of interesting. And maybe, Michigan was always pretty hard hit, I thought, by the virus. Maybe it didn't have as much prevalence as places like New York and New Jersey. And so there just wasn't as much virus to go around in these protest settings, at least not enough to spike things. But I don't know. Interesting news. I think we've been surmising that that's been the case for some time, but just some confirmation I thought I would share with you. Another break coming up here, and then taking us into the last segment. So a good time for us to pause and gather our thoughts here and see if there's any way at all that we can just sneak out of the COVID-19 topic for a little while. I've found one. A lot of people have shared these with me too, so maybe we'll make that the focus when we come back. There's been a bit of gun fail news in the roundups lately too. We might want to share a little bit of those, some of the more ridiculous stories. And no surprise, since COVID-19 caused a spike in gun sales. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, final segment. Are we ready? Let's see. One of the things that's flying by on the alerts, it is SCOTUS decisions coming out today. I was going to say it's sort of SCOTUS decisions day, but I guess they're all decision days. They're just pouring out everything that they've been able to finish up with in the term. They held a lot of important cases until late, so they're beginning to come out. I don't see, I don't see a list of everything that is already out and what else is coming today. Although I have seen some other people explain who is likely to be writing for the majority in some of these cases. Charles Gaba has this on the healthcare front, noting that there is a case that's now out. Or I guess he's retweeting Kate Smith's tweet from her report on what's going on at the SCOTUS. Let's see if we can open that up. CBS News reporter passing on the fact that SCOTUS upholds that private employers who object to birth control for religious or moral reasons can opt out of Obamacare's requirement to offer birth control coverage to their employees, which is regressive and stupid, and some of what we were afraid of happening from a conservative court. Charles happened to note here on this, the only shocking part of this decision, though, was that it's 7-2, with Kagan and Breyer joining the conservatives, and that is kind of shocking, really. And he follows up with this comment, and probably worth keeping in mind. Tell me again what a piece of cake that Medicare for all or any federally funded universal health care coverage bill, which includes abortion or birth control, really is going to be. In the face of a court like this, it's going to be difficult. Of course, one approach to handling that would be go forge forward with your plans, but also pack the courts. And also, by the way, another good plan would be, even if you didn't forge forward with Medicare for all or something similar, pack the courts anyway. Because eventually, and why do it? Well, there's a lot of reasons for it, of course, and we should discuss that one day soon. And maybe one of these days, I guess if we finally, I don't know how we're supposed to get to this point, but I guess if we end up caving into, I don't know who anymore at this point, and canceling cancel culture, we could at some point talk about what's going on at the Supreme Court and the need to pack them and how to approach it with Armando, because, of course, we can't do that now because Armando has, in fact, been canceled. And as he pointed out to me the other day, not to me, but to everybody else that he was conversing with on Twitter, he actually is a canceled person. I never thought of him that way, and I never really given much thought to the cultural war swirling around cancel culture because I thought it was ridiculous. I do note for the record that I did hear about that wacky letter thing and the wacky response to the letter thing. An open letter in Harper's Weekly, signed by a strange mix of people, really, including some people that we probably all quite like, at least at some level. And then, of course, also a fairly large collection of people we absolutely do not. So, I guess it's one of those instances where people will say, well, see, both sides, or, they're coming together, and some you like and some you don't. They must be doing something right. I don't know. I didn't read that letter. That letter doesn't make a difference to me at all in any way, shape, or form, and I probably wouldn't. I don't foresee spending any time on it. Maybe the derivative responses and counter responses will become interesting. But as I understand it, as I interpreted it, skimming over it, even though there were people who signed the letter who I like and would seriously listen to if they felt like explaining it, seemed like a lot of complaints about nothing to me. That it seemed like, for the most part, they were very widely read proponents of, in this case, the letter, complaining about, well, I guess what has become known as cancel culture, and the probability that writing something controversial will get you canceled. Although really, honestly, for the most part, the signatories struck me, with a couple of exceptions, as people who really operate with very little danger of actual cancellation. They're very well insulated and working at major outlets that don't frequently bow to that pressure when it comes to their opinion columnists, and that they weren't in a great deal of danger. Although a few of the people on that list try very hard to press that issue, it seems to me, every week, and try and get themselves canceled so that they can complain that they were canceled. Anyway, little side note there. Maybe one of these days we can get back to the subject of what to do about the courts. Anyhow, that leads me back to the topic I thought we might spend the last segment on, which I had a lot of people point me to. I'll quickly note before moving on to there, I said that there were a couple of gun fail stories, and I'll have to dig up. There was a tweet the other day about gun sales and their increase during the COVID-19 pandemic and associated lockdowns, which was kind of interesting. And you usually should anticipate a rise in gun fail stories alongside that. Kate Sherrill had sent me one about a gun fail in her town that was remarkable, mostly for, in her eyes anyway, for being in her town, but just notable that, yeah, this happens everywhere, and it probably struck her when it was, the story struck her. The bullet didn't, thankfully, that it was happening so close to home. Evansville, Indiana, which I guess doesn't give away too much information. A 16-year-old boy is dead after an apparent accidental shooting Saturday night. Just, unfortunately, something that you'd have to point at as a routine. Teenagers get together and show one another the guns, and then they tell muddled stories after the fact. But somehow, somewhere along the line, somebody shot somebody else. We were just fooling around with the thing, and we don't know how it happened. Here's one of the "we thought the gun was unloaded" things. There you go. And, the conflicting stories being about, well, how did it happen? Well, I put the gun on a shelf, and it started to slide off because all the shelves are obviously crooked, and we didn't use a level when we hung them or whatever. That didn't appear to be the case, I'm sure. But, things fall off shelves. I tried to catch it, but it fell to the ground, and it went off, which is usually a red flag, and the gun nuts love to point out, modern firearms won't fire when they're dropped to the ground like that. That's impossible. Usually you find out if you press the case a little further than that, and the cops don't always do that, I tried to catch it, but I missed, and it fell, and it fired, is actually a story about I tried to catch it, and I succeeded in catching it. But the thing is, when you grab at a gun falling out of midair and clasp at it, very often you stick your finger into the trigger guard and pull the trigger, and Well, when you pull a trigger on a gun, it fires. And I guess people think, well, ultimately what you're talking about here, at the moment of truth, the gun fired because I pulled the trigger. That story will get you in more trouble than it fell to the ground and it went off. And I don't know whether the cops really bother to investigate. I don't know whether the cops are aware of the qualities of modern firearms, that they usually won't fire, but they're willing to accept it because this wraps up the case faster, or whether they really don't know and they just accept what people say. I have no idea. But then they pressed the case even further, and I guess the story really was that they had a revolver, and they were spinning the barrel, and at some point they opened it up and they held it upside down, and the bullets, when you do that with a revolver, will fall out of the chambers in the barrel and fell to the ground. And they closed it and they kept spinning it and clicking, click, 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 click. It's unloaded. But no, there were 5 bullets in the gun, and when they opened it up, no, 5 didn't fall to the floor. 4 fell to the floor. And golly gee, they didn't realize that there was another one in there until it was too late. It announced itself by firing and killing this friend. Not unlike stories we hear all the time, and there was another one from elsewhere in the country. Oh, Louisiana, that's right. I wonder if I can find that gun story. That one had elements of COVID-19 involved in it. I told you we couldn't escape the story. It was, but again, teenagers showing guns to one another. What this teenager was doing with access to an AR-15, well, the law doesn't differentiate. If you're old enough to have a gun, you can have any kind. He was showing his teenage pal his AR-15, but why? And under what circumstances? The one family was over visiting the other family for a 4th of July barbecue, which is really something you should not be doing in the first place. Never mind that there might be an AR-15 there, but there's a pandemic on, and you're not supposed to be just going over to other people's houses for barbecues, but they figured it's fine because they're in low prevalence Louisiana, which is absolutely on fire with COVID-19 and has been since day one. But whatever, given all of that as a problem, right? The addition of a loaded AR-15 among the kids is really not that much, it doesn't add that much danger to the situation. Typically speaking, right? You're already in danger. Besides, kids don't get shot by AR-15s, as we know, right? I'm sure the evidence is out there. Many researchers say that that's not the case. I don't know, but they get COVID-19, they get AR-15, they get all the teen numbers among the teens, and try and keep your guns locked up and under control, and don't give the kids AR-15s. Anyway, not the worst of the gun fail stories. Well, actually, that one is probably the worst of the gun fail stories. The victim died in that one. We have some non-fatal gun fail stories that are dumb. In fact, I learned this morning that 2 residents of lovely, otherwise, I'm sure, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, were, and do they say Fond du Lac like Frenchified, or do the people in Wisconsin say Fond du Lac? I don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, 2 people who, for whom that is not their chief worry, live there now, who have been accidentally shot both on Monday. One was an 80-year-old, I believe, out for a round of golf, avoiding the COVID-19 the best they can with socially distanced sports to keep active. But that'll cost you, because he was out golfing and he was accidentally shot by a 50-something-year-old who had the terrific reason to be firing a gun. There was a woodchuck on his property. They note very clearly that this woodchuck was on his property, so he felt threatened, I guess. I don't know. So he felt like, what do you do when there's a woodchuck on your property? And the answer is you take out a rifle and just start firing wildly at it. I think everybody knows that. You don't have to be a Wisconsinite to believe that. Although, aren't they the Golden Gophers? And maybe they shouldn't be. Anyway, point is, the woodchuck, I guess, was near enough to a golf course. And I guess woodchucks and gophers, are they the same animal? I think so. I don't want to insult either of the two groups, but there it is. He was out there. He saw the gopher. He said, to hell with that. I'm going to shoot that MFing gopher, golden or otherwise. And so he took a shot at him and he missed because he's actually not very good at what he's doing and he wasn't really very close to him and whatever, stupid excuse. And it ricocheted off some trees. And anyway, it ends up hitting an 80-year-old golfer. And luckily, non-fatal wound so far anyway. I mean, who knows what happens. Now the guy has to go to the hospital and he gets COVID-19 in the hospital and dies from that. And then they'll say he didn't die from that. He was shot. This is outrageous that you're including him in the COVID-19 death count. But he did die from that. He was shot in the leg. I don't know. Not sure how this one's going to come out. But there you are. They do note in this article from the Mercury News, which it's not I thought that was the San Jose paper, but maybe there's a Mercury News in Wisconsin as well. Or maybe it is the San Jose Mercury News and they're just running the CNN wire service story because it's so weird and wacky. And it's weird and wacky that happened at a golf course too, right? And brought you back to Caddyshack, right? Kill all the Gophers. And this guy, I heard you right, kill all the Gophers. But what ended up happening was I shot all the golfers and it wasn't even a joke. Anyway, they note also on Monday in Fond du Lac and at the Fondy Sports Park, which sounds like it might be a gun range, but is in fact it says it was I read the story yesterday, it was a water park, but I guess they also have a roadside amusement park and miniature golf and bumper cars. But as I read, and all they say here in this story is also Monday in Fond du Lac, a 32-year-old woman was shot in the leg at Fondy Sports Park. Blah, blah, blah. It was determined that the gun in her purse accidentally went off. I read more of that story yesterday via Twitter. I'll have to find you the tweet that they'll absolutely 100% prove beyond a shadow of a doubt exactly what happened. That story was that she took the gun with her to the water park, which is, of course, well within bounds because there's lots of gang fights at the water parks these days. Also, there's, I did see there's a lot of terrorist chatter about attacking water parks, particularly in Wisconsin. So you're going to want to be armed at all times. This is just, she takes her gun everywhere. And, I take my cell phone everywhere too, but if I'm going to a water park, I think ahead and I say there are precautions that I should take so that I don't get my cell phone wet. And I suppose if I was carrying a gun, I would likewise also, I might say, don't bring the gun. But if I bring the gun everywhere, I would say, let me do something to make sure that the gun doesn't get wet, because I assume that getting your gun wet is bad for various reasons. Well, anyway, she didn't take those precautions. And why would you, after all, if you're walking about armed everywhere because of how many precautions you take? Why take any further precautions? She took it with her to the water park. She got the gun wet. As I understand the case, she was trying to dry the gun off because, oh no, the very important thing in my purse is all wet because I went to a water park and I didn't plan for that. And she was trying to dry it off, and I guess who knows how she did it, but fired the gun, shot herself in the leg, and there ends the story of me protecting myself from danger by carrying a gun everywhere, at least for the time being. We'll see whether it changes her mind any. My guess is she boycotts water parks going forward, but whatever. Okay, that's not what I wanted to spend the day telling you. And hey, maybe even the next story isn't necessarily one I wanted to spend the day telling you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. A lot of people pointed me to the Vanity Fair piece, and to share this with you, I'm going to have to sacrifice one of my few free firewalled opportunities to read Vanity Fair, and that's going to cost us next time Gabriel Sherman writes a story about how stupid Donald Trump is, and we decide it's time to share it. But if that doesn't happen until next month, we'll be okay. For now, it is Kevin Cruz writing in Vanity Fair, and we all know Kevin from Twitter. He's our favorite Twitter historian. He, when he's not writing these pieces or explaining history to us, he is browbeating Dinesh D'Souza on Twitter, which seems to be his major pastime. And, I'm not going to gainsay how he spends his hobby hours. I think it's fine, and I enjoy reading it. But this is a story of some interest to us. Why a Biden administration shouldn't turn the page on the Trump era. Sounds like something we ought to be interested in, as I spend the bulk of my time on Twitter these days advocating for the either the international arrest, trial, conviction, and execution of Donald Trump, or something quite like it. So this, I'm thinking, is probably a milder approach. But a good reason to share it is that, we ought to be clear with the Biden administration, not that it's going to change anything necessarily, that the voting base is tired of letting bygones like these guys be bygones. The Obama-Biden administration wanted to move forward rather than hold Wall Street bankers and CIA torturers accountable. Remember, we have two different problems there, perhaps in some way interconnected. Maybe COVID-19 has something to do with that too. If elected, Biden should follow FDR's playbook and expose his predecessor's corruption and mismanagement instead. That's the subheader here, and already starts off with a great argument, being a historian, of course, as he is, showing us historical precedent for doing this. So let's follow along and find out what he's got in store. As Joe Biden looks ahead to the presidency, he should look back as well. See? Look back. Right off the bat. Should look back. When he first entered the White House as Barack Obama's vice president, Democrats faced a crisis nearly as large as the combined health and economic panics confronting them now. But back then, Obama's team had little interest in holding accountable the individuals and institutions that created those problems. Whether it was the Wall Street bankers or the CIA torturers, Obama insisted he wanted to, quote, turn the page and, quote, look forward as opposed to looking backwards. I certainly remember that quote. A range of wrongdoers paid no price, and as a result, many went on to make the same mistakes again. Very interesting because, of course, we had caught them dead to rights in previous administrations, and then we just stood by and watched them do the same thing for George W. Bush. Same thing and worse. And then, of course, I had the opportunity to go to the White House and say, hey, that happened, and it will happen again, and it'll happen worse unless you take these guys out of circulation. And they said, that's ridiculous. How could it possibly get worse? Besides, we're not interested in doing it. And, the rest is, as they say, the subject of Kevin Cruz's life's work, history. If Democrats actually want to move on from the Trump era, and we do, they'll first have to provide a real reckoning with the past. Not everything can be probed, of course, but a deep dive into the administration's mishandling of the coronavirus and other crises, plus its wider pattern of incompetence and corruption, could be warranted. On this point, a look back on the most successful Democratic administration in American history, Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, is illustrative. Taking power 3 years into the Great Depression, the Roosevelt administration famously wrought fundamental changes to American political, economic, and social life. Yet that only happened because Roosevelt and others first convinced the country that fundamental changes were desperately needed. As historian Eric Rauchway has recently reminded us, FDR spent the 1932 campaign making the case for a drastic new direction, but Roosevelt wasn't alone. That same year, the Senate held hearings to uncover the causes of the crash. After 10 months, though, the Committee on Banking and Currency had accomplished little. 2 successive investigators were dismissed for lackluster work and a lack of results, before a third one was hired in January 1933. With hopes he might be able to scrounge some sort of report out of the thin findings and help the Senate save face. The new investigator, Ferdinand Pecora, seemed an unlikely choice for Washington. A Sicilian immigrant from the east side of New York City, Pecora had worked his way up through the district attorney's office, handling major cases against murderers, gangsters, racketeers, and corrupt politicians. He sent the state banking commissioner to Sing Sing, yes, the old name for the prison, in case you weren't aware, and put a state comptroller there too. Pecora also turned his attention to Wall Street, closing down 150 bucket shops, shady outlets that handled illegal bets on stock performances, and sending several of their owners to jail. I guess we eventually just decided to make those bets legal instead and call them, like junk bonds and penny stocks. Pecora was hired to wind down the committee's work, but after reviewing their records, he decided the work wasn't finished. He urged the senators to extend their investigation. He soon got results. As his first witness, he summoned Charles E. Mitchell chairman of the National City Bank, now known as Citibank, then the largest bank in America. Sunshine Charlie strode into the Senate confidently, but Pecora exposed him as a con man. Oh, wouldn't that be great to try to do to somebody we know? The multimillionaire had avoided paying any income taxes in 1929 through a shell game maneuver in which he sold, and that's in scare quotes, 18,000 shares of bank stock to his wife and then reported a $2.8 million loss. Meanwhile, Mitchell and other National City officers had awarded themselves $2.4 million in interest-free loans to stave off stock losses in the crash as all around them went bust. The hearings tore Mitchell's reputation to tatters. He resigned from the bank in shame, that won't happen anymore, and braced for criminal charges. Also a distinctly small possibility of that in these days. When Roosevelt took office just weeks later, he announced plans to explore, quote, all of the ramifications of bad banking so that the government will be able to guard against their continuance and prevent their return. That sounds like a great idea. The new president urged the Senate to continue its hearings, marveling at Mitchell's misdeeds. My gosh, he remarked, I feel Charlie took my money. And so the hearings continued. Democratic Senator Duncan Fletcher of Florida, a Florida man, took over the chairmanship of the committee, but the inquiry, now known as the Pecora Commission, clearly belonged to its chief counsel. FDR encouraged the investigator to press his luck by calling an even more notorious banker to testify, J.P. Morgan Jr. Public interest in the infamous House of Morgan was so pronounced, the committee had to relocate to a large caucus room in the Senate office building. Pecora appropriately put on a show, revealing that neither Morgan nor any of his 19 partners had paid a single cent of federal income taxes in either 1931 or 1932. I feel like I know a guy who could get caught in just the same way. This was actually due to their own losses in the market and entirely legal, it says parenthetically, but the nation's unemployed didn't care. Pecora also proved that Morgan kept a secret preferred list of elite clients who had been allowed to purchase stocks at special below-market prices. The list was a who's who of the elite, including both Republican President Calvin Coolidge and his Democratic opponent in 1924, John W. Davis, then present as Morgan's legal counsel. Some senators found the spectacle unseemly. We are not engaged in political vaudeville, harumphed Senator Phillips Lee Goldsboro, a Maryland Republican. Senator Carter Glass, a crotchety Democrat from Virginia, called it pointless grandstanding. We are having a circus, he said sarcastically, and the only things lacking now are peanuts and colored lemonade. Was that a big thing? Glass's comment inspired a press agent from Ringling Brothers to show up the following week. During a break in the hearings, he escorted Miss Laia Graff, a circus performer described as, quote, 22 years old, 28 inches tall, and 24 pounds, into the chamber, up to the witness, and right onto Morgan's lap. Tipped-off photographers happily snapped away. Interesting tidbit. The committee's leaders were livid. Reporters recorded the shades of their outrage, noting that Pecora flushed a deep crimson, while the chairman turned a beet red. Important to know. Fletcher warned photographers they'd be banned from future sessions if they ran their photos. Notably that afternoon, they were all gone. Despite their worries, all the drama helped make the hearings a success. Pecora became a national celebrity, appearing on the cover of Time and Newsweek in the same week, that June. More importantly, the cause he pressed became a national concern as well. The American people who had looked up to bankers in the 1920s now called them banksters, gangster-like figures up to no good. That's come back, of course. The hearings had crafted a narrative about who had wronged them and how, and prepared the way for Congress to enact sweeping new laws to ensure it would never happen again. The Securities Act of 1933 and the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 led to the creation of the Securities Exchange Commission, which regulated Wall Street from that point on. The Glass-Steagall Act, meanwhile, forced commercial banks out of risky investments and established the FDIC system, which guaranteed deposits in case of bank failures. Very interesting, of course, because we saw so much in the way of complaint about Glass-Steagall in recent years. But I think we're all happy with FDIC insurance anyway. For decades, these laws guarded against another great crash. Their evisceration in the late 20th century, not surprisingly, contributed to the financial meltdown of 2008. When Obama and Biden came to office soon after, many called for another investigation into Wall Street to hold individuals and institutions accountable. In January of 2009, Ron Chernow asked in the New York Times, "Where is our Ferdinand Pecora?" In April, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi likewise called for a new Pecora commission, even pressing Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner about it. But nothing happened. Obama wanted to look forward. This time around, Democrats should learn from Obama's mistakes and Roosevelt's successes. Policies follow politics, and before any administration can move forward, it first has to make clear what it's moving forward from and why. Leaders have to tell a story before they turn the page. That's it. We've actually reached the end of the article. That gives us time now only to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But I'm glad we at least got all the way through the article. We'll be back tomorrow. Greg will be back tomorrow, and we'll cover the news. We'll probably cover some of what gets covered later on. Here's what, we'll see what we can pick out that Justice has got on tap for you that we didn't get to today after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, hey, how about this one? 4 states sued the Department of Education and Betsy DeVos for stealing pandemic relief funds meant for poorer K-12 public schools and diverting the money to private for-profit academies. I told you, even in our exit from this show, we're unable to disconnect everything from COVID-19. Justice takes over next. Stay tuned.